have reached the hour of 10:01. I'm calling this meeting of the Transportation Committee to order. Can we have a roll call, please?
Chaplin. Here. Colbert. Here. Evans. Here. Ozog.
Here.
Tornatore.
Here.
And Zane.
Here.
Okay, and as starting with chair remarks, I want to welcome all of our new members. And now I'm going to turn it over to Chris, who's going to introduce our staff.
Yeah, I just wanted to take this opportunity. We've got some new members to this committee, but also new members to the board. So I just wanted to take a minute or two to introduce some of the senior staff that you may run into, see at these meetings, given presentations, et cetera. So the first is our assistant county engineer, Bill Edson. Bill oversees everything project related, engineering, land acquisition, construction. He also oversees our traffic engineering group and handles all the permitting. So that's Bill. John Loper, many of you, no stranger to any of you. He's our chief planner. Anything planning related, he takes care of. Large studies, very active. It's our impact fee program, transit issues, anything Elgin O'Hare, Western Access, and the airport, et cetera. So I don't want to marginalize it, but at a high level, we got Mary Irwin. Mary is our financial services manager, so she's in charge of the money. So I keep close to her, but also she takes care of the budget audits and our accounts payable receivables. We have Mike Figueray. You wouldn't know it today, but we're in the middle of snow and ice. And so we're out mowing and tree removal today. So, but Mike oversees our two seasons, which is winter and then the rest of the year in the summertime. Landine is my assistant, and she makes sure I come to these meetings on time and I'm well prepared. And then everybody knows Barb Reynolds, our assistant state's attorney, and just wanted to use this opportunity to introduce my team to the committee members and new board members. Thank you.
Okay, thank you all. Next up, we have public comment. Per the DuPage County Board rules, each in-person remark and electronic submission shall not exceed 3 minutes in length. The total time for all public comment shall not exceed 30 minutes. So first, I'm going to start with our RTA representative.
Yes.
Okay. Yes.
Hello,
So,
everybody. Good morning.
You want to come to the front?
Oh.
So if you want to come maybe to the front, so
Oh, yeah,
we
sure.
can
and
not turn our necks.
just by way of information,
Oh, so he's on the video. Okay, so he can be behind me then.
by way of information for our new members, formerly we had a public transportation committee, but that's now been rolled, its functions have been rolled into this committee. So it'll be integrated into what we do. So take it away.
So good morning. My update is really short. My name is Fulu Liao. I am the U Mobility Outreach Coordinator for DuPage County. And the only update that I have is that the proposed operating budget, 2-year financial plan, and 5-year capital plan was adopted on December 15th. And you can find that at rtachicago.org. And I look forward to working with everybody.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Okay, we'll be talking to you a lot this coming year.
Okay,
so.
awesome. Look forward to it. Thank you.
Dealing sounds rather intimidating. There is plenty to talk about though. Next, I have a Joe Amore. Joe?
Thank you. Good morning. I am Joel Morey. I chair the Bike, Pedestrian, and Transit Subcommittee for the Village Villa Park. It's an advisory subcommittee that provides information to the village board and their officers for transportation issues. During our efforts to try to construct a pedestrian underpass at the Villa Park Metro Station, we became aware of the problems at the at-grade crossing on Villa Avenue. The Union Pacific crossing at Villa Avenue and Villa Park is a vital part of the Salt Creek Greenway Trail system. And I understand that this committee has responsibility over the trail system for the county. I wanted to bring it to your attention that there is currently an initiative as part of a Villa Avenue improvement project that the Village of Villa Park is working with York Township and the city of Elmhurst to provide an alternative access under the Union Pacific tracks because of stalled or the slow freight trains. This crossing is a very narrow sidewalk, only on one side of the street. It was originally designed this way because of infrastructure obstructions. It could not follow the Salt Creek along the trail. So they had to divert it up and over Villa Avenue. Currently, the building entities are working with Civil Tech in phase one engineering to provide an alternative crossing. We are hoping for a pedestrian underpass, not a vehicular underpass, so that because when users of the trail are blocked at that location, they have no other good options. The next crossing would either be the underpass Route 83, where there is no sidewalks, or at Ardmore Avenue, which is, there's no diversion signs. There's also a crossing at grade there. So I have personally witnessed people putting themselves at risk, that running in front of approaching trains, knowing that that train could come to a stop. These problems do not exist at the Canadian National Crossing, which is just south, just north of there, because those trains move through at speed. They are not restricted by their entering or departing the provisory yards. You may or may not be aware of it. Railroads have now taken technology into account and creating trains that are in excess of sometimes 14,000 feet. And because they take a long time to stop or slow down and then speed up, it causes multiple delays of this crossing, including trains that have stopped for hours. So we would invite you to contact the Villa Park Public Works Director. His name is Michael Guerra, Guerra, for following up on any other information. And we hope that you will partner in this effort to provide a safe alternative for people to cross those tracks. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Amore. And then we've already heard from Julio from the IGA. Is there any other public comment? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to the approval of minutes. I move to approve the minutes of January 3rd, 2023. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have some procurement requisitions. I move for approval of DTP 003923. Recommendation for the approval of a contract to Altofer Industries to furnish and deliver one new Weiler asphalt paver for the Division of Transportation for a contract total not to exceed $226,125 per Sourcewell contract. I have a second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Next, I move for approval of DTP 004023, recommendation for the approval of a contract purchase order to Felling Trailers Incorporated to furnish and deliver one new equipment trailer for the Division of Transportation for a contract total not to exceed $35,588.40 per Sourcewell contract. I have a second. Any discussion? Okay, hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Next, I move for approval of DTP 004123. Recommendation for the approval of a contract to Tiger Mowers LLC to furnish and deliver one new Tiger boom mower for the Division of Transportation for a contract total not to exceed $164,488.22 per Sourcewell contract. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Next, I move for approval of DTP 004223. Recommendation for the approval of a contract purchase order to Civil Tech Engineering for professional appraisal and review services for the Division of Transportation for a contract total not to exceed $100,000. Other professional services not subject to competitive bidding, vendor selected pursuant to DuPage County Procurement Ordinance. Any comments or questions about this? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. And moving on to general resolutions. I move for approval of DTR 003523. A resolution, recommendation for approval of an agreement with V3 Wetland Restoration LLC for the purchase of wetland bank credits for the replacement of the bridge carrying Warrenville Road over the east branch of the DuPage River in the amount of $37,440. I have a second, and any questions about this? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All right. Next, I move for approval of DTR 003623, a resolution. Recommendation for the approval of an agreement with V3 Wetland Restoration LLC for the purchase of wetland bank credits for the improvement of Lamont Road from 87th Street to 83rd Street in the amount of $4,238. I have a second, and any other questions, discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. All right, next we're going to move on to item 8, discussion, public transit.
Yes.
Mr. Snyder.
Yes, so,
Where do we start?
right, so I'm sure many of you heard actually at the PACE presentation. Talked about public transit and the looming $730 million budget shortfall facing our service boards beginning in calendar year 2026. So this issue is front in the region among our transit providers, our legislature. It was an item on our legislative agenda. So I've asked John Loper to kind of just give an update of where we're at today. So this is the first of what I expect to be many meetings as our recommendation, talking to Chair Ozog as well as Chair Conroy, to develop a framework going forward for DuPage County so that our interest for DuPage County, but in the interest of the region is taken into consideration as this discussion moves forward over the next 12 months. So John, with that brief introduction, you've got 30 seconds.
Okay. Thank you all for your attention and welcome to the Transportation Committee. So again, it was nice to see Julio here. Thank you for stopping in. He's really boots on the ground for the RTA. I mean, he fulfills a new and important role, I think, for a lot of the transit dependent folks throughout the region. He's one of how many county representatives? 6 or 7?
We got 4 right now.
Oh, 4. Okay, all right. So anyway, moving on. So all of you, and I think most of you who've been on the Public Transit Committee are pretty familiar with the notion that the public transit services have suffered greatly under COVID. We're still at about 45 to 55% of transit occupancy of what the pre-COVID ridership was. DuPage County currently actually ranges from about 15 to 25% on a daily basis of telework. And so there's always a question at this point as to whether or not we will ever really see full ridership again throughout the suburban area, at least, and even into the south suburbs as well. So under that particular mindset, RTA and CMAP, the Regional Metropolitan Planning Organization, helped kind of put together applications for and received almost $3.37 billion worth of federal grant money for the region in order to support operations of the bus, Metra, and CTA services. That was a significant amount, and it will carry at least the operations of those agencies through 2025. And the hope is ultimately that we'll see ridership, approaching pre-COVID levels again at some point before that. But in any case, if it doesn't, then there are a lot of issues to be resolved in terms of fares and how we actually recoup operating funds. So the region's grappling with a lot of competing interests, and most of you probably realize that, including equitable fares. There's a lot of discussion about, zero fares or reduced fares for folks who are very low income. There's fare box recovery issues. There's a mandate currently for 50% fare box recovery across the system. Right now, they're not going to meet that target. Probably will be between 5 and 10% short of that. And they're also, working with older, longer-term capital debt, for existing conditions of their lines and their fleets. And so with those and trying to modernize the fleets while also competing with these operational funding issues, it's going to be a very difficult, navigational piece for them over the next 5 to 10 years. As you all know, the county has been an advocate for mobility and transit throughout the region. We still, through community services, we support the Ride DuPage services in DuPage County. We've been, a strong advocate for that, but we are not an operator, and there's an important distinction there. And so, a lot of what we advocate for, what we do, is to work with the transit agencies to really help bolster their case for federal money or to help support them in their decisions to reroute. CMAP and RTA both undertook a significant work in 2020. CMAP was tasked with something called the Mobility Recovery Initiative in 2020 That was a 2-year effort, really as part of their obligation to the Illinois General Assembly. They have an obligation to produce a report to the General Assembly in January of 2024. So all throughout this year coming up, they're going to be working with a number of subcommittees that are, one of them happens to be co-chaired by former Chairman Cronin. And so that will be an interesting process, but we hope to be engaged in support of Chairman Cronin on that effort. RTA strategic plan came out and just recently published a draft, which the county commented on. The draft plan is called Transit is the Answer. They also did their RTA annual budget. So in those two documents, they developed an advocacy and action agenda, which was really calling for secure transit funding for the whole system and delivering safety and security measures across the whole service area. And that was really being done in an effort to kind of restore public confidence. There's obviously been a lot of security issues on CTA and some of the bus system. So I think that's one of the things they will be focusing on quite a lot. Piloting a free fare program for low income, and as I mentioned before, implementing a fully accessible regional transit system. That ILGA report that I was referring to, 3 subcommittees, including the system that we want, how to pay for it, which former Chairman Cronin is co-chairing, how to implement the systems. I think there was a diagram in what I sent to you, kind of describing what will be considered under those 3 subcommittees. Basically, he's going to be representing the 6-color county area. Many of the representatives on these committees are Cook County and other, kind of urban interests. And so we anticipate working with him closely over the next year to formulate kind of a plan of attack and what, how we as counties, see the region and the evolution of transit, at least in our area. Next steps. We'll be working with Chair Conroy, Chair Ozog, and Mary Keating from Community Services to formulate what is considered to be a public transit framework. It'd be kind of something that we have not done for a long time at DuPage County, is really to kind of put out there a platform of what we think DuPage County needs, wants, and what the most important things are for us as a public. We're going to augment, a lot of that with our DuPage mobility plan, which is currently in edit and should be out by March. And in that, we'll be talking a bit about what we're going to be doing in the short term and in the long term, both in terms of advocacy and action on part of DuPage County. So, and then we'll also be looking at being an integral part of the PACE network revitalization and system-wide restructuring initiative, which is coming in 23. So right now, as many of you probably know, PACE is operating under probably a decades-old routing and bus routing throughout DuPage County. And so they're looking at kind of a vertical and horizontal restructuring of their network services, including the suburbs. And so we expect to be a big part of that conversation over the course of the next year. Any questions? There's a lot.
Member Stark. Thank you, Madam Chair. I was just wondering, with President Biden's big infrastructure and transportation bill that just passed late last year, did any of regarding these capital and operating cost challenges from our transportation partners, did they get any big chunks of money for Metra, PACE, CTA?
So I think they're still operating under those three federal bills that came through in 2020 and 2021, CARES, CRISA, and the ARPA Acts. And then I think the anticipation is that in 2024, 25, they'll be looking at that next amount. At that time, I would hope that we would have figured out what the regional recovery ratio is going to be and what kind of support they're going to need.
Thank you. One more question, real quick. The jargon that you mentioned fare box recovery. I don't know what that is.
So roughly about 50% of the operating funds, just how train operations or bus operations are required to be covered by fare box, basically go in and pay cash or whatever, your ticket costs.
Right.
That amount, obviously, without having a lot of ridership or reduced ridership, is going down. And so how do you make up for that loss of cash that's coming in through that? Currently, it's literally billions of dollars to operate the system each year, and the feeling is that even if you do change, legislatively that fare box recovery ratio number, you still have to make up, that additional amount, whether you reduce it by 10% or 20%, you still have to make up that amount.
Thanks, Jim.
So-
Thanks, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Member Chapman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, I just want to say I'm just very pleased that public transit has been merged with transportation. I think it's going to get a lot more attention and the attention that it needs. So I'm very pleased. I'm excited about that. And I love this committee because I always say this committee, without roads and good streets and transportation, that's an economic driver. We can't get to our jobs. People don't want to come here. So it's such an important and good committee and a great committee. But I'm really curious about this PACE restructuring. So they're doing it this year.
Yes,
Correct.
starting out this year.
So they're going to be studying it this year, which I'm really pleased to hear, because I know there's a lot of areas I think at DuPage that if we had routes changed, that were a little more maybe going to like grocery stores, and especially from our lower income areas, I think the PACE would be better utilized. So I'm really excited to hear about that. And will they be asking for public input on those?
I think ultimately they will.
Yeah, I think it's a great.
Yeah, I mean, in our advocacy position, clearly, Chris and I are talking about this, just increasing the flexibility,
Yes.
as and I think Jim Zay has talked about forever and a day. There are just portions of the county that are not served.
Right.
And
District 6.
yeah, if
Yeah,
there's,
and there
if there
are some areas,
if there are
right.
ways to engage private concerns to help support public transit, to kind of make up that lost market area.
Yeah.
And at certain times of the day, it would be helpful.
And then this group that we're having with the with the how to pay for the new system, how to implement it and things like that. How was that was formed? How was that group formed? Was it?
I'll take that one.
Yeah.
So the legislation established that CMAP would develop and deliver this report,
Okay.
and they were very specific to its membership.
Okay.
So it's labor, it's businesses, it's communities, it's civic organizations. There are no elected officials on the group. There are no transit providers. So Chairman Cronin was asked to participate, basically, given that he was leaving DuPage
Yes.
County,
Yes.
given that this report is being delivered to the General Assembly. The expectation is having that historic role in the General Assembly would be helpful in trying to navigate things. So leveraging that skill set. So I've mentioned this legislative, the suburban parts of the region are very lightly represented.
Mhm.
There is a single representative from Will County and a single representative from Lake County. And then all the other community groups and advocacy and labor really are from the region, but very much focused, in the urban core.
I think
And so they've got a daunting task ahead of them.
Yes, they
to
do,
develop these
certainly.
recommendations, and
Yeah.
ultimately, the legislation directs the NPO Policy Committee, which Chair Conroy sits on, represents DuPage, to basically adopt this report prior to its transmittal to the General Assembly. So obviously the role of John and I in keeping this committee aware, but also Chair Conroy in advocating for a regional reimagining of our transit system.
Great.
How people commute every
Yes.
day. I mean, The peak hour of the day is no longer 8 to 9 and 3 to 4. It's midday.
It's all day, it seems. So that's great. And then one last just comment. You know, years ago, we used to do the John Noel Transportation Conference or Public Transit Conference. With everything that's going on in transportation right now, do you think it might be beneficial to have a conference in the fall and invite all the stakeholders like we used to? I mean, it's such an important topic. It's on the verge of changing, right? There's going to be a lot of, you know, we could bring in maybe the CMAP group and have somebody speak from that. We could, you know, bring in PACE and the other groups.
I think that would be a
I
wonderful
think it's,
idea.
you know, I love that conference. I thought it was always very good and informative. And, you know, being finance chair, I do know we have a little, you know, money that we might be able to put into having a very nice conference in the fall.
That would be a great idea.
So just something to think
We'll
about.
revisit
look at
that,
that.
definitely.
I know, John, you were always great helping with that conference, putting it
Yeah,
together.
it certainly had, there were many years that were really good.
There were many years.
Why did
where
it stop
were
doing
really- I don't know why we stopped doing it. I'm not sure.
Just that flagging attendance is kind of repetitive, you know, sometimes, you know, with everything going on in the
Yeah.
region, it's repetitive and, you know,
We
finding
really-
speakers is always a difficult
Yeah.
task.
We are
Now-
very much at a crossroads.
Right now, yeah.
I would venture to say that transportation in the region hasn't seen such a change since the highways were
Yeah.
built in the 50s and 60s.
Yeah.
So we really need to be on top of this and see where we're going. And at this point, it's really magic ball.
And we don't have to do it every year, but you know, maybe
But this fall would be a
every
great
couple of
time
years,
to.
maybe we put it on, you know, see if it's something we want to do, because it was always a good informative. I always thought it was. great.
Yeah.
We'll
Just a thought.
definitely put that on our discussion list and talk about it for the fall.
Okay.
Thank you very much,
Thank you.
John. Any other comments or discussion? Now we're going to move on to old business. Any old business? Hearing none.
I have one item.
Old business.
Yeah, old business.
Well, jump in there.
Yes. So many of you may have received a recent email or I forgot to bring in a flyer in your mailboxes regarding the County Farm Road at Great Western Trail Crossing, just north of here, maybe a couple miles. As you know, many of you know, there's a strong advocacy to improve the safety at that crossing. As we talked to this committee before in the past, in the last 5 years, there has been a single incident of a motorist bicyclist crash, collision. Some have cited additional accidents. Those were actually 400 feet to the south at the nearby intersection of Hawthorne. Over the years, we've done various improvements or enhancements to identify the location of the crossing. Overhead signage, this committee recommended the board and the board approved in the fall, the lowering of the speed limits of 40 miles an hour. This committee also asked and directed the DOT to move forward with a study to look at the crash history, but also are there any further enhancements to not only, I guess, enhance the experience of the users. Again, it doesn't have a crash history, but there are some that we've heard from advocates, users that feel that it is unsafe to cross. So we are working toward, the report has been done. We've seen alternatives, look to bring something forward to this group in February with a recommendation at that crossing. But for any new members that received something to the Transportation Committee, not having the history, I just wanted to take this opportunity to give you a little bit of history, and that you'll be hearing from us next month.
And always feel free to reach out to Chris or myself if you have questions about anything that comes your way. So, Mr. Zag.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Was that recent? Because I must have been left off of that list if anyone got it, so I did not get it, so.
I know it went to, I know an email was
I got
all Transportation Committee. I came maybe last week sometime.
Okay.
And then the fly, yeah. So it would have been from, if I recall, a not familiar email address, just because it's friends of the Great Western Trail, and it's all like the initials.
Okay.
So you might have flagged it as, maybe not familiar. But it did go to all Transportation Committee. I'm pretty sure I can certainly forward it to you.
Thank you.
And then there was a flyer in the mailboxes. The front said help volunteer cleanup, and the back had a paragraph about this crossing, that's history.
Joe Bernardo,
Probably Don Kirschenberg.
well, mine says Joe Bernardo,
Oh,
Great
yeah.
Western Trail.
Yeah, I
Well,
think,
if we could re-forward those to the
Yeah.
committee, that would be
Yeah.
great.
Thank you.
I think when, I think they're expecting this report to be done at the end of December. I think we kind of talked about. I think people were asked again, as we go into the spring cleanup and more activity on the trails, again, keep this in front of the transportation.
Somebody must have been talking about it because I have two emails, one from Joe Bernardo on Thursday and one from a Frank Dubois, who talked about the same issue. So they came from individuals, not from.
Yeah.
Organization.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other new business? Okay, hearing none, I move to adjourn this meeting. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.